Hi, my name's Yanni. I'm an Aboriginal peer support worker at Headspace Adelaide. I'd like to acknowledge that the land we operate from and are meeting on right now is the land of the Kaurna people. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present and future, and acknowledge Headspace's commitment to making a positive contribution to young people who are Aboriginal.
Welcome back to Headspace Sessions podcast. My name's Claire from the Community Engagement team at Headspace Adelaide.
My name's Sam and I'm a Youth Ambassador with Edinburgh North.
And today we're talking all about Adulting 101 and how to get a job. You know, young people, they might decide to get a job when they're still in high school, or they might decide to do it when they're at uni, or they might just focus on their study and focus on that rather than getting a job straight away. What time in your life did you first get a job, Sam?
My first job I got when I was 15.
15? Yeah. What were you doing?
First, proper job would have been at KFC. I was just a cook there. Yeah, I worked there for almost 4.5 years.
That is commitment. Yeah. I actually can't remember how old I was. I probably should have thought about this before we jumped on the recording, but I was definitely in high school around year 8 or 9. So what are you, 13, 14, 15, somewhere around that mark? Yeah. And I worked in a dog washing salon place.
Oh, no.
And it was one of those classic, first summer job, first time ever getting any kind of employment, just happened to see the thing on the door of the shop that they were looking for someone. And it was the classic summertime job where you're like, what is happening? What is work? And try to work out how this whole world works.
Yeah.
But also, it was also epically fun because I got to hang out with dogs every weekend during my summertime.
Yeah, I loved working at KFC because I still love KFC, eating it. Yeah, back then I was a KFC fanatic and it was I'd hit the jackpot, free chicken, have chips, it's so good. My parents really hated it.
Did they give you perks?
So you get the staff discount.
Yeah, cool, yeah.
But sometimes you'll be able to take some chicken. They're just we've got leftovers at the end of the night,
rather than chucking it out.
Yeah, no. Sometimes it's look, it's just been too long. We'll have to chuck it. But sometimes look, it's doors closed. No one's gonna buy it. Just have a piece and all.
Just have it. Yeah.
Okay, I'm not gonna say no.
Benefits. How did you find going for that first job without any experience?
It was hard. So I remember when I first started applying places, and I did I say case my first job just because of how long. I did work somewhere before them, but I just don't really call it a job. I was not there for that long, and it was just not really working. It was so very old school. Yeah. But I would just walk around and I went to my local shopping centre and I just handed my resume in, not just obviously the supermarkets you have to apply online. So, and I did that, but a lot of the smaller businesses, I just handed in my resume. I was hi, can I speak to your manager? Oh, here's my resume. Yeah. I had to print out 20 of my resumes and just handed them out to my locals. And then, one place got back to me and then But then after that, it was just applying online. Because nowadays, almost nowhere has just a hand-in resume anymore.
I know, yeah. I wonder if it's still... I think there's still some value add to doing the online application and then going in person saying, I have applied online, but I just want to, put a face to the name and kind of help build that connection so that when they're looking at that online application, they have some sort of memory of who you might be. Yeah. But I definitely was the same when I was younger, back in the day. Exactly. When I was applying for jobs, it was the same thing, printing out that resume and going around and just sort of being like, I'm young, please hire me. Trying to embrace the skill sets that you had. Yeah. Do you remember if there was anything you emphasised specifically on your resume or things because obviously you don't have the work experience. Yeah. So what do you even put on there when you've never worked before? Because
I applied to a lot of food places because I just assumed first time job, you apply to a cafe or a restaurant or something to that effect. So I remember writing that I did food tech in year 9. Yeah. And I'm really good at food. I don't know, my first resume and I have done professional resume building courses now. So my first resume and my current resume are so very different. Just in not just what the content is, but the focus of them, because my first one was all about me as a person, what I can, bring to the team. I'm fun, I'm happy, I'm easygoing, I'm hardworking. Whereas my current resume is I've got these skills. Yeah. I've been promoted this 20 times. Yeah. I've got this.
Very matter of fact kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah. So you made sure to emphasize those positive traits that you had. Yeah. I think it's important when you haven't had that it's, obvious work experience that you still have experience in life, and you're right. And even just positive personality traits can in and of itself be skills. And I love that you made sure that, you know, you put food tech on there. Like, 'cause that is, in, you know, it's still skill development.
If I'm working with food, I want them to know that I know how to work with food, I guess. But
did a class in high school.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's what the whole point is, to know how to cook, I guess.
Yeah. So with creating that resume then, do you feel like you have any tips for young people that for their first resume when they write it?
Yeah, so your first resume realistically should be, obviously you're going to introduce yourself, like what your name is and like probably like a home address and an email address and mobile number. I started off with school, so what school I went to, and then it was life skills or like personal attributes, something like that. And then it was my volunteering history, because I did volunteer. Like, because the workforce is sort of restricted by age a little bit depending on where you are, whereas volunteering, like you can, you know, if you're in primary school, we did the Fredder Frogs, selling those Fredder Frogs for charity, or, you know, doing World's Greatest Shave. I was going to say donating blood, you have to be 18 to donate blood, but some, like things like that, like going on the Good Friday appeal and going out and door knocking, those kinds of things are also good because they show that you put yourself out there. And obviously, like, because those aren't age restricted, and a lot of the time you can do them with school, without school, like with like, you know, sporting groups. Another one is like sporting.
Yeah, I was gonna say like your hobbies and interests.
Hobbies and interests, like if you're clubs and stuff. I wouldn't like, I mean, maybe nowadays it's a bit better to put like esport, like competitive esporting, but like when I was applying, games were still viewed as games. I mean, there was esport culture, but it was still, especially in Australia, is not viewed as much, you know, in as better of a light.
Yeah.
And then I would finish off a resume after doing all those things. I would finish it off with availability and then referees.
Yes.
And my first referees were just school teachers or someone from like a sporting club or something like that. Like just maybe like 3 adults who could vouch for me.
It's a very good point. I had not even thought about, you know, references when you've never had a job before.
I don't know. I feel because at least my parents definitely emphasized, because for adults when you're going into industry, especially for higher positions, putting references on is like a big and important detail, because they have to be like, so if you're going for a really niche position, you have to be confirmed to be able to do it. And so my parents said, hey, look, if you're going to put together a resume, no matter what level, you should just put references, because who knows, they might call on you. Now, I've never had any of my referees ever get contacted because I've never applied to jobs. Well, I guess the jobs I've applied for, they have essentially just been like, we're looking for you.
Yeah, yeah.
I've been very lucky with my job finding, because I've either been sought for a position or I've only had to give like a quick interview and they were just sort of needing to hire people. But yeah, you know, you might, if you wanted to say you were applying, this is your first job and you're applying for a position where you need to be known to be reliable, they might want to contact one of your referees and be like, does this person, you know, always show up on time or something like that. But
like to training or to like things that you've committed to.
It's possible. I mean, if I were to be an employer and I saw references, I might give it a crack and be like, I want to see what this person is. I don't know. It's a bit different nowadays, obviously. Yeah. I think the whole hiring process is just so different. But yeah,
it depends.
It really just depends on what you're applying for.
But definitely when you're writing that first resume, having those, still thinking about those skills that you talked about.
I would say make your resume like expandable.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it.
Because you want to be able to, or like interchangeable. So like you got your first job and then you go for another job, take out one of those things about maybe like your hobbies and then replace it with what your current job is, and always put things in past tense as well, just because employers aren't a big fan of you knowing that you have other jobs. They want to be, you know, they want to see themselves as special. So they just be like, hey, like, you know, I can do this, I have done this. And it just makes you look like you got a bit more experience.
Did you ever look up those resume templates when you were younger?
Yeah, all the time. Yes. I would use the resume templates. Word provides so many resume templates, especially because, and obviously again, professional resumes don't like flashy colors and all that, but when you're younger, it might be worth having a nice looking resume with like, you know, one very bold highlighted color for like headings and stuff, just because you want to make yourself, at your age, you're going, especially that 15, 16, you know, first job time, you want to stand out from basically everyone else, because unfortunately, there's only one thing about you that's really important, and that's how old you are. And if everyone is 16 and they're all applying for the same job, like you need to be able to differentiate from the others.
Yeah.
And so those resume templates are really good. And they're also really good because they just got the headings there for you, so you just fill them in.
Gives you that like, prompts for what you could write about. Yeah. No, I definitely utilised those when I was younger, and I almost feel like maybe it's still the layout I use today. I can't quite remember.
I use the same resume for almost 7 years. So it was only until this year that I got a new one because I had to. But
it's true, like when you talked about with that tip, if it's something that can be interchangeable and something that you can sort of add and subtract depending on what job you're going for versus not, like if you can make it this sort of fluid document that you update as you go along through life, that can be super useful.
Yeah, exactly. Because one thing you have to remember about your resume, especially for like that first time, is that it's not going to be the be all end all. Especially when you go to an interview, like your resume really just is that foot in the door, especially if your employer wants to interview. That's where you've got to, like, that's sort of the part where you want to shine. And it's worth like looking up, interview questions and stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. Should we touch on the interview process?
Sure.
So you've done the resume drop, you've written the resume, and they've asked for you to come in for a chat. What are your some of first experiences with interviews, and what are some of your tips?
My first interview would have been, my first 2 interviews sort of went like, okay, it's like, oh, hi, you're, introductory, blah, 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 my name is, all that. And then it was like, why do you want to work at this position? And there's nothing wrong to like completely honest and say, I want to work here because I'm 15, I've just turned 15, I want some pocket money, my parents don't want to pay for my, my Pokemon cards or my, I'm showing my age here, but yeah, like I love Pokemon cards or, when you get older, I want to buy games online, I want to watch movies with my mates, I want to be able to, get like lunch from school.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with being at least that kind of level of honesty.
Or you can even phrase it in some way where you don't have to be like blatant to the fact of it. But you can say, I'm looking for more responsibility in life, or like trying to take on a new challenge.
You want to be like, I'm here because I'm wanting to get into work.
Yes.
And employers, I think, really appreciate just honesty.
Yeah, absolutely.
They don't want someone going, I'm here for a new experience because I've never done something like they're going to be like, okay, you're like everybody else. Just tell me why. Oh, because I want to be better at this, or
absolutely.
I think I've got good customer service skills. I can talk to people really well. They like that kind of stuff, and they can see that in the interview.
Yeah.
Another question that was really common was really like, oh, what are you doing right now? Like, what are you doing at school and stuff? They want to see like what, and they're like, oh, so what do you want to be?
Some sort of like future thinking, so they can see how you fit within the organisation.
Well, they want to see realistically, especially if you're in year 10, you've got 2 more years of school, maybe 3, right? They want to see if you're going to stick on up until before you leave for uni.
Yeah.
Because they don't want someone who's going to leave in the next year because, you're going into a trade, so you're probably, you're going to be gone in a year time because you've moved into a different, into a better paying position essentially.
Or maybe they just want to be aware of like what's to come.
Oh yeah, exactly. And like they'll also be like, oh, do you do sports? Do you think like that?
Yeah.
It was really short. My first interview was really short.
Yeah. Well, what about now then, I guess, leading into an interview? Do you take time for that sort of self-reflection about, the role, how I fit within the role, some of my skills that fit within that? I know I spend time doing a lot of that so that when any curveball questions or any questions come up, I've got some sort of grounding in my brain about what my why, I guess, in some ways.
Yeah. So my most recent interview that happened this year, it was for like a bit more of a like big person job. It wasn't like a retail fast food.
Yeah.
And a lot of the questions were like, do you believe you have the the ability to uphold the responsibilities that we as an organisation need to keep? And it was like, wow, that's a big question, but it really essentially boils down to like, can you do the job?
Yeah.
And you got to go, yeah, I'm not.
You have yes, but expand. Yeah.
It's more like when you like. I like talking about what the job like expectations are when they ask me those things. So it's like, yeah, it's really good that I'm able to choose my own times because I'm able to put it around university. I don't like working shift work because I don't want to be forced to take up a whole day of my time when I could just work a couple hours here, a couple of hours there, and still make up the time. They were like, that sort of makes sense. And they, especially if you're in university, like they going to expect that you also prioritize your studies at some point. Like they'll be like a bit, they'll be a bit hesitant if you are very blasé about your studies. I'll just work all the time. I don't care about studies.
It's fine, not prioritizing.
No, because they're gonna they want people who are able to time manage in that sense, because it's important.
Yeah. I think for me as well, when I go for an interview like that, especially one that I'm like really excited about and definitely want, I have scenarios in the back of my brain that can sort of be applicable to different questions. So, that classic question of like, how do you cope under pressure? Or like, is there been a time where XYZ has happened to you? And so having scenarios in your brain where like there's been like a customer service incident where you've had to do conflict resolution, or having something in your brain where you've had to, in my role, develop like partnerships, or like, build relationships with people. It depends on obviously the industry you're going from, the job you're going for. But I think it can be really helpful to have sort of some of the scenarios that you can think about, that you can sort of bend and weave depending on the question that comes at you, to give you also sometimes some space while you're telling that story about like how it still applies to the question, but then you could probably add more because you've given yourself some more space to think about things. Does that make sense?
Exactly. And because I've not had too many interviews that are very long-winded, but I remember one interview where they basically just kept on asking me questions, and it was like, go online and get like 10 most common interview questions.
Absolutely,
and it's just keep writing answers until family, say mum or dad, or like a brother, sister, cousin, anyone is happy with the answer. If someone goes, I like that as an answer, then you probably made it. If not, if they go, that's a bit shaky, keep working on it. You want at least someone else to be like, that is a solid answer.
That's a good answer.
Not just like, it's okay. It's like, that's very good.
And that comes down to that practice and self-reflection that you're doing before the interview. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think another thing is to not look too, like we talk about all this like knowing, but don't look too rehearsed. Like they want it to feel natural. They don't want you to think that all you do is like research and regurgitate. They want you to be like, they want you to do the self-reflection, but because like if you regurgitate, it just looks a bit like they're just doing it because they think that they're going to get it, not because you care. You can apply it to your own personal self. I still think also the research is important though, because have you ever had that question of like the company's values and like how you feel like it applies to yourself? And that has caught me out before, where I've gone, I didn't research the company values. I'm not sure. And so then spinning it to like, well, my values are, do you feel like that fits in? But I have had that happen too many times now, where I'm like, I will, depending on the company, will make sure I at least go look that up so I know what they are. It's interesting. Normally, like I kind of don't, because I just... So company values, and like... Don't always get caught up on them, because they really are mostly the same.
I know, but that's why I think when you can spin a question, so like still understanding that sometimes in an interview you might have questions pop up, but you're like, oh, oops, I didn't, and trying to not let that derail you with what's going on, because we haven't even touched on this, like interviews being such an anxiety-provoking experience. They can be the worst. Like I remember just like sitting in my car for like 10 minutes before an interview, just like going, oh my God, I'm gonna mess up. It's like, no. Take a breath, listen to music. Just go. So is that kind of your like pre-interview ritual?
Because like, I'll have, when you apply for a job, a lot of jobs will have like what this job is, and literally it's like your key to success, because it's got everything you need to know about the job, but it's also got everything that they want you to know about the job. So if you just show that you've actually like read the job description, they will be like, oh, good. Is someone who's, kind of understands what they're doing.
Aware and can apply it. And What about what you wear? I feel I have some thoughts. Of course.
So I've done a couple of interviews, and I did one with you. So first one, I was just in school uniform. That's completely fine. Coming to an interview in school uniform is not a bad thing, especially if it's your first job. They're going to say, oh, cool, they're a student. Now, if your interview's on a weekend, don't come into your school uniform. At least for dudes, it's a button-up shirt, and it's really like, it depends on the weather, and it depends on the type of job you're going for. But shorts versus pants, because you don't want to wear trackies. Please don't wear trackies. But you also don't want to wear like shorts that are like inappropriate, like board shorts essentially. Like anything really that like is, you'll be able to tell if your mum goes, that's what you should wear, then that's,
I think it's something that you feel comfortable in, that's neat, presentable. And I'm all for the an element of expressing your personality within it
Exactly.
too. So like if you're someone that likes to dye your hair a certain color all the time, I think it's important to present that in an interview so that they know this is who your personality
Exactly.
is. Because at the end of the day, an interview is about not only do I fit with this company, but does this company fit with me?
So-
And like if that's going to be a point of contention for the rest of the time you're there, it's good to rule that in or out at the beginning. And
100%.
so, yeah.
Well, I'll tell you a really funny story about that.
Okay.
I had like frosted tips when I did my youth ambassador interview.
Yes.
And they still took me on.
That's
so
good.
it's not about like unprofessional. It's all about like, because like some people might be a bit archaic with what's professional and what isn't. But I think as long as it's got a level of sincerity, it's not like you're not rolling out of bed. If you can wear it anywhere in any situation, no one's going to be like, that's a bit, you know, daggy looking. Then that's probably a good outfit.
Yeah.
Because I like I said, button-up shirts, but I've got plenty of like ones that have got patterns. I've got ones that's like different colors, you know.
Yeah. So it shows personality, right?
Like they don't just have to be, but because they're button up, it's got that sort of like
professional
air.
Yeah.
I do normally do like the just like I go to like Connor and get like pants.
Yeah.
Just like they don't have to be anything fancy. Just because like I do wear trackies a lot, but like in an interview,
probably not the best.
not the greatest.
Yeah. Comfy is good, but also some sort of neatness.
Because you want to show. Because I think like a lot of problem is like they don't want to see you too comfortable.
Yeah.
Well,
they probably want to see if you fit into the work
I think
culture
that's
and because you wouldn't wear trackies depending on your job.
Exactly.
To an office job.
Well, a lot of companies that provide uniform, their uniform isn't trackies. So it's like they want to see you be able to wear like clothes, because a lot of jobs make a big emphasis on presentability as well.
Yeah.
So you got to be able to show that you can adhere to that.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of jobs, especially in the food, it's like you're not allowed to wear like any makeup, you're not allowed to wear any nails or anything like
course,
that. You're not allowed to have any like external things, piercings and all that. So you kind of have to take that into account about what you're applying for. Because I know a lot of people who do have the piercings and they go to interviews and the interview's like, just letting you know, you're going to have to take all of this off when you come to work.
Yeah.
And it can be like a bit of
again,
a...
it's that thing where you can roll it in or roll it out. And if that's something that's something you don't feel like you can do, well then that's good. You know the expectation right from the get-go, and so you can roll in or roll out based on that. Yeah. So what about so you've done the interview, what happens about getting a new job? You mentioned before we started recording that you sort of in a recently new role in the past year.
Yeah.
How do you settle into a job?
Settling into jobs is real... So I'm a bit of a like make mistakes to learn kind of dude. So I'll keep doing something until someone says don't do it.
Okay.
It's not like a great practice. Like obviously if I know something's wrong, I won't do it. But it's more like if I get told how to do something, I also like ask, and I say this, please ask questions every step of the way. If you're not sure, ask a question.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think people, like you might find employers get really annoyed, like why asking a question, like, oh, I already told you this once. Like some people just don't retain that. Like it could be like something really insignificant and it's a tiny thing and you go, oh, sorry, how did I meant to do it again? Like,
yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. Because sometimes they give you a giant book and they like memorize every page and you go, I'm not doing that. It's like 25,000 pages.
Yeah.
I'm not remembering like every policy and procedure that we have. I'm just going to ask a question when it comes into the situation. Because like that's how I learn. Because like, yeah, with my new job, it's like a lot of it is sometimes I'm a bit unsure. There's a lot of situations because like there's a very like, you know, linear way of doing things. But when you actually go to a job or you start working, every day is different. Every, situations will change. So when I was working at KFC, it's like we would get like the promotions in. So you would have seen just like we do like hot and spicy all the time. We do those like kind of flavored different kind of chickens, and it's like they have different sort of procedures to normal chicken, and then they have different cook times, and then so it's like you got to make sure you're doing it the right way. No problem. There's no harm in asking. You do get trained in them, but that might be one hour session at the start of the promotion, and then you go on holiday for a week or two and you've forgotten everything.
Yes.
There's no harm in asking,
Literally.
Sorry, how are you doing this again?
And even just asking your coworkers or people that are
and
like
you don't have to, exactly.
Yeah.
So like I lean on my coworkers a lot more than the management. Just no. Sometimes management is really good. Sometimes you can get a bit stricken out with them depending on who it is.
Depends,
and it's like, it's again, like I said, it's a day-to-day thing. But your coworkers who are probably like a more in your area and also just your age range, maturity, and also on your level, like in the workplace. It's just easy to just be like, hey, what's the go? Because they're probably going to be more willing to do it without, you know, judgment because they're in the same position as you.
Yeah. And I think for me, when you start a new job, I really try hard. When we talk about like retaining information, like I find, depending obviously on the job, you can't really take notes if you're a cook, but like trying to take some notes depending on the kind of job I'm doing, or whether that's like mental notes, which I then go write down later, or things like that to try and help me, because that's just the way I retain information.
Yeah, so I've been starting to write things down just because my current job involves a lot of people's names, and so like and I'm not going to remember, you know, if I have to go to one workplace, I'm not going to remember the 15 people that I have to see and then go to another workplace and there's 30 people I have to see, because I'm just not going to hold the information. So I write it all down, and then I make sure that I know who I'm going, and that's sort of like an expectation of, like, that's not uncommon. Like, there's nobody else that I work with who doesn't have that issue. They're like, I'm not going to be able to remember 15 people's names that I never see them half the time. Like, you know, thankfully a lot of places you can give name tags and things like that, but it's like, I don't want to just rely on name tags. I do want to be able to put names to faces. But
absolutely. And I also think it's one of those things of being kind to yourself about, like, it's okay. Again, that's a question, like, just re-clarifying to someone, I'm so sorry. Could you please just remind me of your name again? It's nothing against you, you know, just, you know. Yeah. Sometimes.
It's because even when you're in, so like at KFC, we had the name tags. Some people just didn't have, like, put their name tags on. I'm like, I've never seen you before.
You're like,
who are you? And like, they go, you don't know who I don't, and like people go, oh, hey, Sam, how's it going? And I'm like, hi.
Oh no. Yeah.
Hi, worker.
Yeah.
Hey, how are you going? And then like reading the roster, going, who's this person? Is it's this person.
Yeah.
And then like researching, go, oh yeah.
Trying to remember where you know them from. Yeah. I've had that thing like in the lunchroom where I try and be better at being like, if it's a new face, like, have we met before? Like, just trying to re-clarify, like, how you fit, like, you know.
I've done that so many times. I'm like, I start talking to someone and they go, oh, by the way, my name's Sam. They're like, yeah, we met. And I'm like, oh, good. Yes.
Cool.
It happens to the best of us.
Yeah. So I guess along those lines, then being positive to yourself when, or being kind to yourself when you start a new role, I think is important. Yeah. Being positive about the experience, because, you know, sometimes we fumble through those first couple of months of starting a new job when you're learning things and establishing yourself and trying to find your groove and trying to have that positive self-talk as you go along with that. I think is really important.
Yeah, exactly. And when you, like, I've done a lot of work with a lot of different companies, and I've done arguably a lot of work in so many different just like industries. Yeah. And you find that you really do have to find your fit. Working in fast food is like, and retail and those kinds of places is really like, I see people who have been there for 20, 30 years, but then, you know, I see people who can't even last it 2 months or 2 weeks. And so you do really have to put yourself into perspective and go, hey, look, I applied to KFC, I hated it, I quit within 1 week. All right, I'm not going to then apply to Hungry Jack's the next day because it's the same type of work. I'm going to instead go, all right, well then maybe I'll apply to Coles. And then if the same situation happens then, I'm again not going to apply to Woolworths. I mean, I could, because, you know, sometimes workplaces are a bit different, but you have to think about the type of work you're doing. But then you see that a cafe position has opened up and you go, oh, well, I'm really good at making coffees, or like I would like to do a bit more hands-on work with those kinds of things. Yeah. Maybe a kitchen hand position opens up at a pub or something. Like, you got to think about like that kind of thing.
Self-reflect on the things you like, the strengths you have, where you want to fit into.
And I think it's a good idea to, even if you're never going to use them, get some stuff like certificates and things like that. So like, I have a certificate in retail. I also have my RSA. I've used my, so luckily with KFC, they provide like a traineeship and you can do those kinds of things. But if you wanted to, there's nothing stopping you. I mean, they do cost a bit of money, so that's something to consider. But if you're thinking, well, hey, I've never worked behind a bar. I'm 18, I've never had a really job, you know. Now I want to get a job. I'm thinking about, you know, I like, you know, having a drink. I might go behind a bar, but I can't even get the work experience because you need to have a responsible service. So there's nothing, you know, you could consider getting the RSA, applying for a position, and then working behind a guy. If it's not for you, it's not for you. But you have a qualification that's really good. You know, say you end up working for a distributing company and they end up taking on, like, you know, some alcohol distribution. well, then you could be someone that's like, you know, because you've got your responsible service, you actually are able to, you know, work with it.
So keeping doors open depending on what you want to explore.
You don't want to like close your doors on yourself because you think that you're not going to use those things, because you never know. Like, life is very, very different. And now is a really good one is to get like COVID Marshall certificate. Because even today, like in today's world, even though it's like, you know, we're 2 years away from lockdowns and all that, I know that I still get asked to have to provide a COVID Marshall training certificate because
to show
that you actually know, because we're meant to be able to uphold. At any time the government asks for us to uphold, you know, social distancing mandates, we got to do it. Yeah. Like,
it's so true.
Those kinds of things are really, and those things are free as well. Like,
I was going to say, is that something that's still free?
I'm pretty sure you can just get it through the SA government. Yeah. So that's like things like that you can get, and you can also, I think, just get. There's online training courses. You don't have to go to a TAFE anymore to get certificates. Like, you can just do everything online now, which is really good for, and it's something good to add to the resume as well. Once you get a certificate, put it on your resume and then apply somewhere. So, because like my retail certificate in retail is a proper Cert 3 recognised by the SACE board and everything. Yeah. Like, a good way to show that you have gotten formal education on how to handle money, how to make sure things are hygienic, make sure, you know, people are adhering to, you know, safe working policies, because that will make you stand out from someone who doesn't have that.
And that you're willing to learn and expand your learning.
Yeah, exactly. And it shows that you're committed to like the work, that industry as well.
Absolutely. I wanted to quickly also touch on something I don't think we've explored quite yet. It's about networking as well. Yeah. I find that in Adelaide, or depending on where you live, sometimes it's definitely like who you know in some ways rather than what you know. It's important the what you know. Yeah. But networking and trying to establish people that you want to get to know is really important.
Once you start, and that's the most accurate sort of the who you know, not what you know is.
I still think what you know is important.
It is important.
Obviously that's the thing that helps you get the job.
Definitely here in Adelaide, it goes a bit more one way, and I'll admit that I have essentially been offered jobs because of who I know.
But is that because you've made an effort to network, establish relationships?
Well, sometimes yes. Yeah. Sometimes definitely yes. Like, one of my jobs was like, I had, you know, done something in university. Yes. And since someone from another university who was involved noticed, and then that's how I did make connections that way to be able to get it. But another one was my sister managed to get me in.
Yeah, but I think I'm more keen to touch on the like establishing your network and trying to.
It's so surprising how, because a lot of people think about actively networking. Yeah. So I'm going to put myself in this, you know, get LinkedIn and then connect with all these people and then get a job. I did some very passive networking where I involved myself with, school clubs, university clubs. Yes. And then through those connections, I was able to find employment that way because you don't need to actively look for people to know to be able to get a job. You just need to be able to, because especially when I got offered jobs, it was like, oh, well, you've got a really good personality. So I think you'd be a really good fit. Well, they're able to even get that connection in the first place. Yes. And it wasn't through LinkedIn, it was all in person. You know?
Yeah, well, because I was going to say a lot of the jobs in my life that have happened has come from either like volunteering and so establishing your networks that way, like trying to find if there's opportunities for you to volunteer in the industry you're curious about, it's really good to sort of dip your toes in that so you can start building those connections so people know your name or your face or some sort of connection that way can be so beneficial.
Exactly. And you can do, because like, especially when you're in high school, you're a young person, doing work experience is a really good way to network because you're not employing and you essentially are volunteering your time. Some places will actually will pay you, they'll compensate you for your time, but you're in year 10, they're probably only going to be like,
Yeah, but it's still
but they're still going to be like, hey, look, so it's basically like an internship kind of thing. You're just going in, you're doing a bit of work. You might even just be doing, filing or sorting for like, a legal firm. And then, you've got some, the name partner decides that they, think, well, hey, if you did law, give us a call in 5 years once you finished your degree, and there might be a position for you here, or we can get a coffee and talk about your thing.
Literally that.
Or if you you're about to study, you're about to go into a law degree, you're just about to finish year 12. How about we have a coffee and we can talk about what you need to know, things like that.
Yeah.
Like it's all about like you're putting yourself out there, making yourself look ready to take on more, and then make yourself also just really show who you are. I think
absolutely.
Be yourself when you're working. Don't be the person you think.
It's like a walking resume, for lack of a better word. Like you are showcasing all those skills that you talk about on your written resume, of all the things that you are dedicated to doing, that you want to do, because you can do it as you're doing it.
Because you can write whatever you want down, but until you show it, there's no proving it.
Literally, absolutely, perfect. Cool. So I guess in the scheme of things, we've talked a lot about, how do you write that resume, get that first job, get your foot in the door, what happens once you get the foot in the door in the interviewing process. Through all of that, how do you balance your brain with a lot of it? Because I find it's a big yo-yo experience.
It is a bit exhausting. And it really does take, step one is applying. And then it's waiting, a couple of weeks. And then step 2 is getting an interview. And then it's waiting maybe until the interview. And then step 3 is, after the interview, is just waiting for a response.
And possible rejection. How do you deal with
Exactly. And
rejection?
Sometimes you just get a no, we're not interested. And I've gotten plenty where no, we're not.
Absolutely.
So it is unfortunate. I've applied to many jobs and like so many that I can't even keep count. And I've only gotten a response from a handful. And then the ones that I got responses for, I managed to get to interview. And only maybe a few that I managed to get an interview that was successful. Most of the interviews were not most, but some interviews just don't go well. Some companies use really weird interview techniques where it's an online interview, but it's not face to there's no person behind the camera. You're answering questions that are written down, and you have to be able to record yourself. And
so
it can be a bit jarring. And then once you get the job, you've got to be able to go, whew, okay, clear up. And then you have
new routines, new people.
Exactly. You've got to be able to, so you have to mentally unload everything you've just experienced. And then you have to be able to free up space to be able to take on all this new information. Because, you got co-workers, and then you've got new policies, procedures, you've got what the work is, and then you've got to be able to actually do it, commit to it. And, some people just can't. And it's okay to put your hand up and say, I don't think this is for me anymore. And some people are they'll judge you, and that's on them. But it's, as long as you're being truthful to yourself and what you can do, don't feel as though you have to do something because someone is telling you to do it.
And I think through that whole yo-yo process, it's really, for me, about finding that balance with it. So making sure that I'm being okay, so today I know I need to apply, or I would personally like to apply for 5 jobs or whatever I decide to do. Or after an interview, making sure that I take time, sort of compartmentalize it, if that makes sense. So I know that this time is to focus on that. And I know that's easier said than done, but trying to mentally take a note of treat it like a job in some ways. I'm not working on that right now, so it's okay for me to go do the things I enjoy and focus on that. And it doesn't mean that it's going to worsen my output of whether I'm going to get the job or not. Because sometimes I would get in my head about if I'm not always job searching, I'm not always interview prepping, then I'm going to fail and get the job. And that's just not true. If anything, that's going to lead to you maybe actually failing, not getting a job, because you're burnt out, you're burning yourself out. And so really finding that balance.
And I think it was really good. I remember I would get really big bursts of productivity, and I'd apply for a bunch of jobs, and it's completely okay to just be I don't want to apply for a job this week. I don't want to apply for this.
Absolutely.
It's not easy applying for the job, putting all this effort for maybe 10 different jobs, and then none of them getting back to you.
Exactly.
It can be very mentally exhausting.
Absolutely.
And you don't want to make it, and it can make the process a bit traumatizing as well. You don't want to make job hunting that much harder than it already is, and then you don't want to make yourself resentful to not getting the jobs, and then putting out expectations that you're not good enough. It's that's not. If you're not getting a job, it's not always on you, it's on the employer.
And I think all those things are really important. It's about finding that balance, but also understanding that you as a person through this process is important, and it's important that you put yourself first through a lot of that. And I think if anyone wants help along the way with any of this process, Headspace actually can support.
That's right.
Yeah, so we have the work and study support program at Headspace. Your local Headspace centre probably has someone that can support with it. If not, there's Headspace online at headspace.org.au. And there's a great bunch of resources on there and online chats that you can kind of engage with to help you with this process. I know we both talked about today a lot about how hard that journey can sometimes be, but sometimes also really rewarding, and all the things you can learn along that way. So feel free to look into that support if you would like to explore this topic further. But otherwise, thanks so much for listening and joining us today.